This chapter has me so worried. I've come to like Kokushibo much more than Muzan. I think that he's got more potential in the long run of the series as well. On top of that, I think that he has a much more interesting kind of just like layout and design to him. Relatively, I don't think there's anything at this point that I like more about Muzan outside of the memes, for at least, over Kokushibo, because Kokushibo, I think his design is cooler. He's a former demon slayer. Not only that, he's amongst people of the first breath. He's got probably the coolest style within the whole series with the moon breathing. How many forms he's got, how many weird yet beautiful panel layouts he has to it. But we've got some worrying flags in this chapter, but I'm not going to give up hope until it's over. But as it was, Genya with his like demon power infused gun went and shot at him. And what's interesting is that Kokushibo actually deflected them when they first did, but them being controlled by Genya, they got kind of like rebounded, just manipulated in midair, came back and hit him, got into his hands, and that alone didn't seem too much, but from them, a bunch of like tree vines came just, raging out. This instantly grew up roots and are holding him in place. And he's realized, exactly that the dude is eating some of his hair and part of his blade, and he's using blood demon art. So I think this is at least another contributing factor, hopefully, of the series going further than this arc, because Genya's character hasn't gotten as much spotlight as I think he deserves. I think he definitely needs a little bit more to him. But it's introduced now this blood demon art that he's going to be capable of using, a pretty useful one at that, because it's going to have like crowd control abilities. So, why introduce that other? It'll feel weird if it's introduced and this is the only time he's ever used it, instead of this being the introductionary period of when this is used. It will feel a little bit kind of ass pulley in a way for him just to get it. At least I don't remember him using it before. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, if I'm just forgetting, tell me up. But I'm not bothered by it because blood demon arts all seem different depending on the demon. He's obviously boosted off of Upper Moon 1, so it makes sense he'd have a very powerful one to use in this temporary boost. But from them, Kokushibo is in a bind. He's in a bad spot. He's bound by these roots. He's got 3 different pillars all coming at him right now, all boosted off of the mark, and he's having a flashback. He's remembering something. It was the last time that he's felt in this kind of like absolutely just shaken state. Not like out of fear, but it looks like he just it's like a disturbance in who he is, and he's remembering back, he says, like 400 years ago. And I really liked that the author specifically said it was under a red moon, because you look at this scene and you can get the full version of this panel used reading the chapter, and you think of it just kind of in the moonlight, mostly a clear sky, just illuminated in that faint glow of the moon. But in this version, it's red, so you're getting a little bit of a creepier tone to it. And he comes up against somebody he hasn't seen in 60 years, at the time of 60 years. It was his twin brother, who's got, the same mark as him, but his is on his forehead, funny enough, in the same spot that Tanjiro has his. So, I think that's going to be something. I think that's a sign. I'm going to take it as a sign right now that Kokushibo's not going to die. Because one of the things I really like in contrast that he has versus Muzan is Kokushibo. He has moon breathing, and Tanjiro is developing, he's clearly getting techniques of the first breath of sun breathing. So you're going to be able to have that clash of, opposites. You have the moon and the sun style swords people. You have somebody who used to be a person using sun techniques who forsake that to become a demon and developed moon breathing. And then you have Tanjiro, who's becoming a sun breath user, embracing this style that Kokushibo abandoned. But he's the person he's met, his brother. He's all old. He says like he's beyond 80 years now, and it's interesting because he has that same mark, and he already said relatively, the people who have that mark die at 25, and his brother 80 and still has it, still alive. makes me wonder if maybe that's one of the reasons he got mad at Himajima, and it wasn't just like, oh, I'm worried of you having this power and living past this, but not just him. It was the reminder of his brother. What was his name? Sugikuni. And they're having like a moment. He's like talking to him. He says like his brother looks like brittle, old. He's become this kind of like pale version of who he once was. His voice is all raspy and hoarse. He just looks like an absolute mess. But it's something that really bothered him. It kind of like confused him. Is like he was in front of his brother, and he didn't even really he had never really shown emotion as they knew him, but now he's shedding tears after seeing Kokushibo as this demon, and now he's gonna have to kill his brother. He gets up, gets his sword ready, and Kokushibo's like experiencing confusion for like the first time, and he's unsure of what's going on. But once Yoriichi grabs the sword, gets in a stance, he feels like this complete thick like cloud, this sweeping presence of intimidation. He says like there's no openings in his stance. It's all around just making him get into a battle position. But he at the same time, the weight of the air increasing of it is, and the surprise is messing him up. On top of his confusion as well, he goes to draw his sword, and already past him, his brother in this one is already like sweep like a big slash into his throat, and he's like, he's mad at him because at the first it was like the surprise of his brother, but then he's remembered, the thing that probably is what drove him to become a demon in the first place. He says like his brother has just always been special. He's always been amazing, even amongst the sun breathing people with a mark. He just has always been this kind of like perfect character, and he says like he even like almost exists by like outside of the laws of the world, and that he thinks that the gods favor him above anybody else. And it was that kind of like difference between them that's always bothered him. You have twins, and the younger brother is just all around messing up his head, and it's very sad for him when you think about it. His just complete and total world probably like pushed heavily from this kind of like relationship he had with his brother, and then he becomes a demon, and then decades later, after probably forgetting about just completely shrugging the idea of him off, he runs into him. And it says essentially that the next attack he knew was going to cut off his head, because that perfect stance, that amazing form, speed, power, and just all around force behind it was too much for him. But it was even a sword technique, he said, that pressed on Muzan himself, and it was almost godly. And he was ready to try and go against him, but he wasn't sure if he could stop him. But that was it. After that strike, it was over. His brother just died, and he died in that position, just one last strike. And I'm wondering if it was like his brother was just living on from willpower and the hopes of taking out his brother, at least seeing him once more, and hoping he can just get one last slash in. And maybe that idea of slashing his brother was pretty much that just ended it for him. He's like, I need to put it all in one strike. After that point, I don't want to live with myself anymore. And just the will of him broke beyond that, which is very such a sad thing. I really like the way that Akutami specifically writes the villains in this series, because a lot of writers nowadays, the villains have sad backstories, so you can sympathize with them and feel bad for them. There's always something special when you just get a character who's just evil to be a vicious, all around despicable person. But then you also get like those sad story villains, and you end up liking them even though they're the bad guys. But there's always a sense like you get like ones that are hit and miss, and some of them that just feel silly of why they're being a bad guy. But with all the upper moons, I don't think there's any that's made me that's had that sad backstory that's just felt not good. Like, they've all been great. Kokushibo's is clearly just opening up, and it's very interesting. And after finding this stuff about him, of him being, somebody who was always in the shadow of his younger brother, torn over, like, he turned demon because of his relationship with his brother, whereas Tanjiro, it became a demon slayer to protect his sister after becoming a demon. And he's taking up the one, he wanted to protect the one sibling and family member he had left, so, he took on this role in this dangerous position to hope both protect her, but also cure her, which, again, is a really good contrast and foil aspect between the two characters. A way I'm hoping that But in this moment, this desperate act, that Kokushibo evolves fully where Muzan, is at, and where Akaza could have been at, and just becomes that the real big villain of the series. And Muzan is defeated, like I said in the last review, and is laid out for the rest of the series as the end game of Kimetsu no Yaiba, that being Kokushibo. But I mean, the interest in there, like I said, there's a lot of conflicting points, or clashing points rather, between Tanjiro's story and design and layout and Kokushibo's. So I just think it'd be better than Muzan, who is obviously like this ancient, powerful guy who started all these demons. And Muzan has more of the story builds villain's design, whereas Kokushibo, I think, has a much more fulfilling end game character, personally, at least in my opinion. Like I said, he can make his version of his demon group much more threatening, because he'll have them know both blood arts and breathing techniques, which will be much more devastating, as we saw with the second Upper Moon 6 that Zenitsu fought. So other than that, comment below, tell me what you thought about the chapter, and tell me how you think this is going to go. And all around, like, which would you prefer, Kokushibo or Muzan? I legitimately, at this point, I just prefer Kokushibo. I think he's a much more interesting character. But, I would like to hear your opinion. And if you would, thumbs up the video, but from the like button and the subscribe button, and check out my other videos. For that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and I thank you all for listening. Bye.